Hello friends, welcome to the practical number 2 of BSc MSc IT.com. So practical number 2 is if we have the two integers stored in a variables, that is var1 and var2 respectively, what boolean test can we perform to see if one or the other but not the both it is greater than 10. So we have to perform a boolean test for the two variables to see if one or the other but not both together is greater than 10. So let's see. Again, now doing this practical, it's a 4-step procedure. So let me just show you the 4 steps. Step number 1, creating a simple C# application. A simple C# application, a project of C# application, console application. Step number 2, is taking the input numbers, two input numbers for variable and variable 2 respectively. Means we have to take the input numbers from the keyboard for var1 and var2 respectively. Taking input numbers for variable 1 and variable 2. Third step, performing a boolean test for comparison, that is if one or the other but not both variables should be greater than 10. So we have to perform a boolean test also to see one or the other but not the both is greater than 10. So performing a boolean test. And step number 4, it's pretty simple. Just run the application. After completion of a code, we need to run an application. So this is our 4th step. First step, step number 1 is creating a simple C# console application project. Second, taking the input numbers from the keyboard for variable 1 and variable 2. And third step is to perform a boolean test to see whether one or the other but not both is greater than 10. And fourth step, to run an application. So these are the 4 steps we need to perform now. So let's see the step number 1 now. Step number 1 is to create a simple C# application, that is console application project. So for that we need to open our Visual Studio 2010. To create a simple C# console application, we need to go to a file, say new project, I'm selecting the type as Visual Csharp Framework 4.0, selecting the console application. Let's give us nice name as practical number 2. Say OK. So by default, Visual Studio has created some libraries, default libraries with the namespace practical2 and a class with the class name program. Let's change this as Boolean test and a main method with static. So we have done with our step number 1. Now let's go to our step number 2, that is taking an input numbers for variable 1 and variable 2. To read something from the keyboard, we use console.readLine to read that value. Generally the value comes in the string format, and to display something on the console application we use console.writeLine. So let's first display something on the screen, that is to enter the first number. So let's display that on the console screen. Now let's create a variable 1, that is int var1, my variable 1, and console dot read line. Now my friends, what happens generally when we enter something from our keyboard, the data is in a string format, usually comes in a string format. The data from the keyboard usually comes in a string format, so we need to convert now, because we are assigning that string value to the integer value, which is cannot implicitly convert type string to int. So we need to convert this console.readLine to the integers. So for that we use convert dot to int 16. Now same way we need to create our second variable. Just copy this, I will say second number, I will say var2 my variable 2. So here we go. I have done with my step number 2 also, that is taking the input numbers for variable 1 and variable 2 from the keyboard. So now let's go and create a step number 3, that is performing a Boolean test. That is a comparison test. It means we need to perform a comparison test for one or the other but not both variables should be greater than 10. So to perform a test of comparison, so we need to first create a Boolean variable. So for that let's go and create a Boolean variable. So by default I am going to set this Boolean variable as false. So to create a Boolean variable we will use bool, let's give a name Boolean test is equal to false. Now moving forward we will use the same Boolean variable, that is Boolean test, to compare one or the other but not both variables are greater than 10. To compare the Boolean test, it's a four step process. So I will show you step by step. So let's see the step number 1, that is first step process of comparison.